Welcome to the Awesome Talks Project, an experimental podcast that is completely unscripted and unedited. There's no website, no email address, and there are no social media accounts. It's just me having awesome talks with my friends about stuff that matters and sharing it with the world. Hey listeners, Katie here with just a couple quick things before we get started on this episode today. I first wanted to thank Kaylee and Christy for hanging out with me and recording this. It was an awesome talk, which is the whole point. I especially want to thank them for sticking it out and re-recording after we recorded the whole episode and then realized that we had a little technical glitch and my recorder was not actually recording. Speaking of that recorder, the episodes are going to sound a little bit different. I think the sound quality is still good, but the last time we recorded last month, I realized that with my portable digital recorder, people seemed a little bit more relaxed and the conversation flowed a little better. So this time we tried it at my kitchen table with the portable recorder, it's very small, and I feel like that goes better in this setting. And people talk more openly without a microphone with a big pop filter attached to it in your face. So I'm going to keep doing it like this. I like it. I think that it suits the theme of the podcast better. So I hope that you guys will enjoy it more and you don't feel too much of a difference in the sound quality. Anyway, one more announcement. We are soon to run out of room on the server that we use to store this podcast, and because it's kind of an experimental podcast, I have a whole nother podcast that I've been doing for 2 years that I put a lot of energy into. I kind of want this one to be just a relaxed enjoyable thing to do for me. So I have started a YouTube channel, and on that YouTube channel, I'm going to be moving all of our content so that I can just delete from my Podomatic server as I need room. So you'll be able to listen to all of the back episodes all the time, forever on YouTube. And as soon as that happens, I'm thinking I can squeak this one on there. I will give you guys a place where I have a link to that all the time. So I haven't done it. I'll take care of it this week. So next month, I'm guessing we're going to start deleting episodes and removing them from the server so we have room for newer episodes. But I want the catalog of all of our episodes to always be available. So that is how the least expensive way to do it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this awesome talk. All right. Welcome to Awesome Talks Project. As it says in the intro, this is just a bunch of friends getting together and talking about things, and I don't edit it for content. I want it to be real conversation. So let's talk. We're talking about mental illness today, and full disclosure, we recorded probably an hour and 15 minutes and realized we weren't actually recording. So we're a little bit bummed right now. I'm setting a timer so that we get Kaylee out of here when she needs to be out of here. And Christy and I get to go to the fucking garage sale warehouse today. But I am kind of bummed. It was a good conversation. It was an awesome conversation. However, I think we're going to be okay.
I think actually the reason it was so interesting is because we're all very passionate, have a passion for this field. And some of us are doing better with, that they have a mental health disease, if you want to call it a disease. I'm really passionate about people wanting and needing the help, getting the help they so deserve. From all levels, whether you're financial,
that's kind of where we were in the conversation when we left off. Was
everybody.
It does.
Rich and the poor.
It impacts every single person. I can promise you that everybody on this planet knows someone with a mental health issue if they do not have one of their own. Like, now I'm all paranoid. I keep checking to make sure it's still recording.
Do you ever find just sometimes there's humor in your situations, though?
Oh,
I have
always.
To make fun of myself, and because I see it I know.
Look, I'm sorry. The reason people make OCD jokes is because sometimes obsessive compulsive disorder is funny.
Yeah, but if I hear one more person say that their cat's bipolar or that Oregonians have bipolar weather, I'm going to lose my shit.
Seasonal weather, what is it? There's a term for it because your depression is onset because of the lack of sunlight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
bullshit.
Seasonal effectiveness.
Oh, no, that's a real thing.
It's real.
I have the opposite of that, though. I get it in the summertime. I really, truly do.
Into flames.
I don't like the summer. I get depressed in the summer. This is like my fucking jam, this weather. I am getting shit done and I am happy. But since we're starting over again, I kind of want to just go an abridged version this time of what we deal with, like what our diagnosis is, because I think it's important to talk about our diagnosis. And that is the whole point in this conversation, is normalizing this conversation. Mm-hmm. Like this is not a weird, obscure thing. This is a thing. And it's something our society deals with. It's an issue and it needs to be taken care of with some compassion and understanding and with some real effort to help. Not this like fucking shoving people off to the side. I don't want to deal with your shit thing. But I was diagnosed, I'm Katie, by the way. I was diagnosed 21-ish years ago when my son was a baby with obsessive compulsive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. I've been medicated for it probably 3 times in my life. I've probably needed medication for it way more than that. And I currently am managing my symptoms by making sure that I am physically active and I work out normal, like a lot. For obsessive compulsive disorder, I find that is actually, for me, more helpful than medication most of the time. However, there are still times that I need a little pharmaceutical help, but it's me. I've been dealing with it for a lot of years, and I'm going to take it to Kaylee.
So I was diagnosed shortly after my brother died by suicide 7 years ago. I was diagnosed bipolar type 2. But looking back, I'd always known I'd suffered from depression, and getting the diagnosis of bipolar wasn't a huge shock to me. But I didn't care what it was called at the time because I just felt like shit. So, okay, name it. I don't care. Just pull me out of the dark. So, I come at this from both an advocate standpoint of being a family member to somebody who is schizophrenic and fighting, and eventually watching somebody die of a disease left untreated. And then realized that being an advocate is exhausting, and lo and behold, I'm a patient. Which I was a patient the whole time, but it's only been recently, within like the last year and a half, where I've kind of relinquished my advocacy role. And I think the best way I can be an advocate now is not by doing fundraisers and spreading the good word. It's by just saying, I have bipolar, and I could be your sister or your coworker or your best friend. It's about just being authentic and going, this is what I deal with, and it's not leprosy, and it doesn't need to be, swept away and something to be terrified of. It's treatable. And I think developing the vocabulary to speak about mental illness is what's going to end the stigma. People need to be able to have the words to use to talk about it without shaming other people or shaming themselves, and without the fear of being labeled this thing that's never going to go away. Mm-hmm. May never go away, but you can figure out how to manage.
You can live with it.
Yeah.
You can. Like, I think now, in my 40s, I'm in a good place overall with my obsessive compulsive disorder and learning to live with it and manage it. I still have days that aren't great, but I now am able to go, oh, that's what I know what the trigger is. I know I can identify what it is underneath that's just because for me it's almost like I itch on the inside. From the inside there's this little thing that's getting at me. And actually, I was going to ask you, and I wanted to while I'm thinking about it. So do you still, is the Starboard project still a thing?
Well,
or?
in theory. So Katie was gracious enough to help me when I was developing a nonprofit called the Starboard Project, which was the idea was be a nonprofit that would raise money to help people that are trying to find resources for the mentally ill. And turns out when you get an idea and develop a nonprofit in the span of like 72 hours, you might be manic. Because that's not something that's not something that's necessarily sustainable. But when you research everything and have like a launch party within a week, turns out you might be a little on the manic side, because I'm telling you,
I didn't pick up on that when you were doing it, but now
because my mania looks like
I assumed that you were working on it for a long time prior.
She just looks really driven right now to get this happening.
My mania just looks like a really hyper productive person that's got their shit together.
Yeah.
So I'm not out running around on Highway 26 naked throwing $100 bills in the air.
If you do that, let me know, because I'll just be there for the $100 bills.
But, no, I'm DIY crazy, and I'm spray painting flower pots, and I'm forming nonprofits. So would I like the Starboard Project to be something that comes to a real place at some point? Yeah. But that's, I think, part of the thing that's gotten me to where I'm at now, where it's like my advocate hat has changed. Instead of doing all of this outreach kind of work, I think the more important job for me is to not overwhelm myself with philanthropy and raising money and awareness. It's about just being who I am and being authentic with the fact that, I have bipolar disorder and I struggle with it, and I'm not a freak.
Yeah.
And I'm not crazy.
No, I have to tell you that it's a completely different situation in that the person that I was busy being an advocate for didn't die. But I so get that.
Yeah.
Like, I spent so many years of my life being an advocate and fighting for a person that I love, which actually ended up being a pretty thankless situation.
Yeah.
And I did it until I got physically sick, because I couldn't step away enough to notice that I was mentally sick.
Right.
Like, it was affecting me. I was depressed. It was aggravating my obsessive compulsive disorder. It was affecting my marriage. It was affecting my ability to parent. And so finally, I think that my body just said, chick, you need to step the fuck back. And I got Ramsay Hunt syndrome. I got fucking shingles in my brain and my inner ear, and I was left with a disability because of it, because I didn't pay attention to my mental health. And I don't know if it was because I don't really get I don't get manias. I don't have that kind of illness. However, we spoke before about living in crisis mode, and my family lived in crisis mode for fucking 6 years.
Yeah.
And I was the one, because I'm the oldest child and my mom couldn't hang and my other brother did, I was the one that had my shit together and was stepping out there to be the advocate, and I forgot about me.
Right. It's easier to channel that kind of energy for somebody else than it is to be our own
to rally
advocate.
for yourself.
Yeah.
Christy, I want to talk about you a little bit and what you're, God damn it, you got to move this plate of cookies away from me now, please.
Cookies are on, gone. Cookies gone now.
My blood sugar's like, what are you doing, bitch? I want to know, I want everybody, the listeners, to know about you and what's going on with you and your...
So, about 8 years ago, diagnosed bipolar 2. Took a long time to get there. A lot of pharmaceutical intervention, tweaking, a couple different psychiatrists, psychologists, till I got comfortable and found somebody who could really, pretty much tell me what I kind of think I suspected all along, because it was always described as mood swings when I was a teenager, and that just progressed as I got older into more volatile situations with my personality, like just raged. Like you could not imagine. Like I attacked the hood of my own car one day because it was not cooperating. And it was shortly thereafter I went back into therapy and we started tweaking with drugs, and just, my life was spinning out of control, and I was pretty content watching that do that. But when you attack your own vehicle, but just simply for the fact that the hood won't open, it's time to really actually go out and try to find help and figure out why you behave this way. And it took a long time. Had a lot of doctors who just wanted to throw meds at me. That was not working for me because it was the wrong meds.
I think we talked about, it's kind of, I mean, I'm bummed we lost our original conversation, but it's nice now to kind of look back and go, I really wanted to go further about this, but you had mentioned that your primary care provider isn't always the greatest person to be prescribing psych meds to begin with, because they're not doctors of psychiatry.
Right. I think for most people, psychiatric healthcare access is shamefully unavailable. And a lot of people only receive care by a primary care physician when they're finally brave enough and vulnerable enough to say, hey, I'm not doing well, I need some help. And so primary cares, bless their hearts, do the best they can. But, without a proper diagnosis, you can oftentimes make a situation worse. For example, like giving a bipolar patient an SSRI, which seems so benign, and how could that hurt? But one of the worst things you could do for a bipolar patient is to give them an antidepressant. And do primary cares have that in their wheelhouse? Maybe some of the most savvy, but the reality is without an accurate diagnosis, they don't know what they're treating. And so I think that people do the best they can with what they've got, and that goes for the doctors too. I think they're doing the best they can with limited resources. It's just, like we'd mentioned before, the system's broken, and we need to turn that into a drinking game. And every time you hear somebody say the system is broken, because we all agree on that.
Yeah.
Nobody disagrees.
Broken. No, and I find it so fucking frustrating when that's everybody's answer to these problems. Well, the system's broken. Well, what are we doing to fucking fix it?
And I'm not talking duct tape, Band-Aids. It needs a permanent solution.
It really does. And I think this is the beginning of it, though.
I think the beginning.
Speaking about it and making it normalized and making, you don't feel shame. I don't, so people don't feel shameful about their struggles. And so people who feel that they need to shame others understand that it's just about their lack of understanding.
Yeah.
And the reason, and it's actually not, look, I am a person with a sense of humor. I have a great sense of humor. I love inappropriate humor. I make inappropriate jokes all the fucking time. But this isn't a fucking joke.
Right.
And I joke about this too. I joke about myself because I'm just, that's how I'm wired. Because if I don't fucking laugh at myself, I'll never stop fucking crying.
Right.
But I just do feel that this is the way to normalize it.
Yeah, I think developing the vocabulary around mental illness and mental health and making it everybody's business, not your personal struggles, but making people invested in the topic, because the stats say that 1 in 4 Americans will suffer from a mental illness at some point in their life, and I think that that's probably an understated number.
I think it is.
And we all know somebody, or we all struggle from time to time, and I think people finally start to realize how broken the system is when they try to access health care for themselves or on behalf of somebody else, and they realize that finally when somebody is in crisis, or when they're willing to ask for help, and when they finally hit that wall, when people on their behalf try and get those resources together, they realize there's not many resources out there.
I'm so thankful that when I actually got my diagnosis, it was because I was a new mom. I had a brand new baby at home. And I had this, probably my obsessive compulsive disorder that I already had and didn't know that I had, triggered postpartum psychosis.
Right.
And thankfully, it wasn't a postpartum psychosis where you hurt your baby, or you hate your baby, or you want to kill your baby. I was afraid to leave my house. I became agoraphobic. like I was saying, I just sat in the dark and nursed my son and listened to fucking that goddamn Bush song Glycerin over and over again and cried. But my son's dad finally said, Katie, this is not normal.
Right.
Like, this isn't normal post-baby blues. Some shit's going on and you need to get it taken care of. So I went to my doctor and I finally, like, I talked to, sorry, I have a booger flapping in my nose. There we go. I talked to my doctor and I'm thankful that I had the doctor that I had at the time that I had her in my life. She was a wonderful person and she was just great. She's like, look, this is what's going on. I think that it's worse than this. I think this isn't normal. Like, this isn't just baby blues. What we typically use to treat that is Zoloft. I was having anxiety attacks so bad that I would wake up in the middle of the night having one in my sleep in time to pass out from hyperventilating in my sleep. Like, it was horrible. But she also insisted you need to go to therapy, and she and her nurse sat down and figured out how, because this was back when the Oregon Health Plan was a new thing.
Right.
And they actually paid for a lot of stuff back then, but we sat down and figured out, like, who I could see for therapy, and they had a dialogue. I signed releases. Medications were between this therapist and my doctor. Dosages were figured out, and I was also nursing, so I mean, there aren't very many things that you can take when you're nursing, but I feel like in that situation, shit was handled the way that it should have been. But I also think that that is an exception to the rule of having your general healthcare provider, like your GP, prescribe psych meds.
I saw a doctor throughout my pregnancy once a month to prepare for the idea of postpartum depression, because I was already known to have depression, and so I was followed very closely during my pregnancy. I was off medications, and so the plan was I was going to see this provider immediately if problems were to present themselves after I had my daughter, and regardless, I was going to see her a month out after my daughter was born, and if I would have any issues at all, call, and there's nothing to be ashamed about, and postpartum depression is real, and you already deal with depression, so you're more likely to kind of come into that. And what do you think happened? I ended up with a 3-day-old, and I was suicidal. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't ask for help because I was too ashamed. And I know
because you're supposed to be this joyous, glowing mother beast person.
I am, my soapbox is mental health awareness and being able to advocate for people. And do you think I was able to do that in the midst of it?
But
of course
here's
not.
the thing. You're sick.
Not. Yeah, you can't.
Of course you can't advocate for yourself.
And that's why people need to be educated on how this works. Uh-huh. And
I did not have a good support system.
People need to be able to ask the awkward questions. Mm-hmm. And resources need to be available to present themselves when somebody finally gets the balls to say, hey, you don't look like you're doing really well.
Yeah. Or I feel like crap, and this is why I feel like crap. This is how I feel every day, all day.
Yeah.
And I know I shouldn't feel like that, so I need help. I need help, and just asking for help. We need
when
to
you finally be able to, when you're finally there and you're able to do that,
let's find something to help you.
And then you're met with a brick wall.
Yeah,
it's devastating, and so many people run into that and give up, and not just by suicide, but they give up by not participating in their lives, which is what I've done off and on my entire adult life, is not participate in my own life because I isolate and hide because I'm not.
That's a good term.
Not well.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about in the last one, and I think that this is probably in general a common thread through all different types of mental health issues is isolating. Mm-hmm. When you know shit's going south. Sometimes you're not. Sometimes I'm not aware. Sometimes I start isolating and then I realize, oh, shit went south.
Right. My husband can spot it on me before I do. He knows before I know.
I don't think that Kurt, my husband, really pays that much attention to that kind of stuff.
I think the only person around me on a regular basis would even notice is my brother. And
does your brother call you on it, though?
He has once.
You told me about that.
Yeah, my brother called me on it once. Mm-hmm. I had 2 friends show up at my house at one time on a Sunday morning. Gave me the option of either having the police called or going to the psych ward.
Yeah.
I went with the psych ward.
Yeah.
Because I don't want the popo in my house. I'm just really weird about that. being drug out of your own house by the police.
Well,
no.
And
God,
here's
no.
something I was talking to my therapist about recently. He has worked a lot of inpatient facilities, and he said that he would talk to these people that are in such grave states, that have been in such dark depression, and he'd start talking to them, and the common thread through everything was, I just needed to rest. It was either die or I just need to go to the hospital and rest. And that's exactly how I felt when I was hospitalized. It was like, I just need to rest from my life that I'm not participating in anyway. And my therapist, who's so smart, said, wouldn't it be amazing if we could all participate in our own self-care enough to do little respites of rest as a normal function of, self-care, and as a normal function of taking care of your brain, so you don't have to end up on a foam mattress in a
with
room,
no bra.
In a shitty...
That's not a place you should have to go to get rest. You should be... The society should encourage people to take care of their mental health before it gets to that point.
You just said something that almost made me cry, and because it reminded me of a time when my son's dad and I were at the height of it was close to the end of our relationship. And I was seeing a therapist who actually wasn't a great therapist. She was a little bit fucking weird, and shit got weird. Like, she would call me at home to check on me, and I don't know. She was just weird. You can fire a therapist because if it's not a good fit, and that's actually what ended up happening. But one thing that she said to me is, I told her, I just want to rest. I want to lay down and go to sleep, and I just want to rest. And I used those exact words, and she told me, Katie, there are places for that. And it scared the fucking shit out of me, because I had a 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old at home, and I was in the midst of a relationship that was going to end, and with a partner who had made threats about wanting to have custody of our child. And all I could think was that if that happened to me, it would be grounds for him to take our son from me. And I didn't get help.
Right.
It terrified me.
Right.
Like, when you and I met, this was all going on when you and I first met. You would have never fucking known it.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
At all. Because I was like trying to make myself be this fucking superhuman mother person. That's not a thing.
Well,
moms are human.
Well, that's the thing that I've tried to explain to my husband, is like, you have to, in order to receive help, you have to become vulnerable enough to admit that you're, air quotes, crazy. So you meet the criteria for treatment, but you have to present as just enough in control as to not have your credibility taken away. Mm-hmm. So how do you walk this line of like, I need this help desperately, but I am not incapable of making decisions for myself. So you have to walk this line of like being very, very vulnerable, but also knowing you also know yourself better than anyone. And maybe that's clouded at that time, but it's terrifying. The prospect is terrifying, knowing that people can use this against you.
Yeah.
So that's where the dialogue has to happen. That's why the stigma has to end, because people don't get help.
Because they're fucking afraid of they're afraid of losing jobs. They're afraid of losing their kids. They're afraid of losing their house.
I was afraid of people finding out.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. You don't want anyone to know.
People found out what was going on with me at that time when I took my trip to the emergency room was because somebody that was trusting with the information told a bunch of other people.
Right.
Now, and then those other people came and were like, here's your options.
Are you still angry with that person? Or
I was never really angry with them.
You were glad that...
I wasn't even glad. It was, for me, it was, well, they just did what they needed to do. It was. I found, at the time, I was just really shocked that they showed up at my house and forced me into those options. And then when I thought I could go to my brother, who was just down the hall while I was going through this, and I'm like, I might be gone for a few days. Could you make sure the cats are taken care of? And don't tell Mom. Mm-hmm. He's like, I think you need to go. Which was shocking that my brother was in tune with me and what was going on then to insist that I go. I'm like,
you have a good brother. I don't know him, but
I was shocked and taken back that he was like, you should go. My brother's one of those guys. He says very little. He's a guy's guy. They don't say much.
What's amazing about people around us
pick
up on, and you think you're holding it together so well, and
Yeah.
then you finally
You're not.
you finally relinquish the idea that you've been masking all of this suffering, and
Yeah.
you show up and you, for whatever reason, decide to let people in, and they go, "Oh yeah, I knew you weren't doing good." And you're like, "What do you mean? I thought I was holding it all
Why
together."
didn't you fucking say something?
Well, if they would have said
Why
something,
didn't you
we
reach
probably
out
would have
to me?
ran.
Well, that's
I
true.
was thinking about it.
But
I thought about that.
But I think that's part of it, is people need to be able, it's not criticism, it's care. And people need to be able to have the awkward conversations and say, "Are you okay?" And then if somebody says, "No, I'm not," there needs to be a place where that can get channeled. Right now, people don't ask the question because there's no answer to give that person if they do say, "No, I'm not doing very good."
You know, I just remember this situation that we were in once. My ex and I think my son was a baby. He had a friend that he'd gone to high school with that had started coming around. He moved to the neighborhood real close to our house. We used to live in Brooklyn neighborhood over Southeast. And
Like
that only matters to people from Portland.
I really like that neighborhood, though. It's a cool neighborhood.
He was coming around a lot, but he got to a point where he was making me uncomfortable. And then it was this whole thing where my ex was like, "Oh, come on, you're just being weird, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, he would come over to our house every single day. And then it just kept getting worse and worse. And I told him one day, because I just, you get that feeling and you have to trust your gut. Mm-hmm. He was very aggressive with me, and he tried to come into our house, and I said, Fred's not home. No. And when I tried to close the door, he stuck his foot in the door. And I pulled it. It was one of those big old Victorian houses over in Southeast. So I pulled the door back and slammed it really hard on his foot and made him pull his foot back. And I locked him out. And he stood pacing on our porch. And I had to call my ex and say, "Hey, you have to come over here. This guy is losing his shit. And he's being really weird." So he came over, and the guy, there's this compassion there because they had been friends since elementary school. They were, he loved him, but the guy fucking stood in the middle of our living room and ripped his nipple rings out. And it was a horrible situation. And I remember my ex crying because he had to call this guy's mom and say, "Look,
he's having a meltdown.
I don't know what's going on with him, but this is what's happening." And he's unraveling. And it turned out that he'd been actually stealing things from our other friends. And so we kind of had to go through our house and take inventory and make sure. But he ended up being put in a hospital.
Right.
But it took so much. It was like this whole, with my ex, I don't want to narc him off. I don't want to get involved. It's not my business.
He could lose his job if he has to go to the hospital, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but here's the thing. This person was in crisis and needed help.
Right.
And even though it was a painful decision to make, sometimes it just fucking has to be made.
Yeah.
Somebody has, I firmly believe, and I don't know whatever actually happened to him, but I do know that I don't think that he would have been alive for much longer had he was very paranoid. I don't know what his diagnosis was. I know he took lithium.
Some hardcore stuff.
Lithium is a fantastic mood stabilizer.
Yeah. So I only know that because he left his backpack at our house, and it was on the floor where my crawling baby could get to it. Oh, and I was like, "Hey, this is not great, dude." But
I think that's why so many people don't get involved, is because the people that are truly in that kind of crisis, they're an unsavory bunch.
Yeah.
They don't want help.
But they're
resistant to treatment.
I think you have to remember that that's not who that person is.
Right.
It's not who they are. It's just not. It's their illness.
Yeah, and somehow we've separated these diseases by level of affliction. So anything above the head is somehow covered under a different insurance plan. Just like your teeth are covered in a different way as your eyeballs. When we all walk around in the same we all walk around in the same meat bag. But for some reason, our vision coverage is different. Our dental coverage is different, and so is our mental health.
Health coverage is fucking shit. I hope it's made improvements but even I'm on Medicare because I have a disability, and mental health coverage on Medicare is a bunch of fucking bullshit.
Well,
it's a joke.
Even if you have excellent coverage, which I'm very fortunate to have, there's such trouble with access. You can have the greatest healthcare coverage in the world, but it doesn't matter if you can't find a provider.
No, and there is such a shortage of providers. Even I right now, because Medicare has such shitty fucking coverage, I chose to go to Portland State University's community healthcare community counseling clinic the last a couple years ago. I went through about a year of therapy, and I actually thankfully found a wonderful woman through that system, and I was super upset when she graduated and I couldn't stop seeing her. I had to stop seeing her. But like, it's these, even accessing low cost, especially low cost and free and sliding scale healthcare or mental health care or counseling services it's a joke. It's a shameful fucking joke.
Well, and there's also the craptastic aspect that there are still insurance companies, policies out there that have no mental health benefits. Jesus. That's really not very encouraging.
No, we had one once. Yeah. We got rid of it because it wouldn't cover that and it wouldn't cover birth control. And I'm like, why do I have this? These are the two things that I use regularly. Yeah. Fuck you guys.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing that I think people, at some point, if they're ever in the situation where they're having to deal with somebody in crisis or they find themselves needing help, is it doesn't matter what your zip code is, what kind of car you drive, how much money you make. It does not matter. This disease does not care how good your family is, how much money you have, how much money you don't have. It doesn't care. It doesn't.
It's non-discriminating.
It does not discriminate. And it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter who you know.
Nope.
When it comes down to it, we're all very, very vulnerable given the fact that the system is broken. Take a drink.
Yeah.
We're all as vulnerable as the next person. And I think a lot of times the only thing that separates us is the support system that you're fortunate enough to have.
If you have one.
Yeah. And support systems come and go. Because of the nature of mental illness being so unsavory and, resistant to treatment and resistant to intervention, and a lot of mentally ill folks don't want to be necessarily cornered on how they feel. So you get a support system that gets slapped in the face constantly. Eventually that support system walks away.
It's hard to be an advocate, even when you are mentally healthy. It is hard to advocate for someone who doesn't maybe always want to be advocated for.
Right.
They want to be left the fuck alone.
Right. Yeah, my brother showed up one time, and he would go on walkabouts and be missing for periods of time. And, this one time he kind of floated back into my life and told me, he's hearing voices and he wanted help, and he'd actually been in the emergency room and they discharged him to my care. And he had been walking for days. His feet were bloody. He was hallucinating and he wanted care. And so it was a Friday evening and I'm like, Jesus Christ, of course nothing's available over the weekends. What am I going to do? I kept him doped up on Benadryl all weekend long. So he slept, which was a good thing because he was so exhausted anyway. He didn't really fight that. But come Monday morning when he'd been sleeping in a bed for a few days and had some real food in him, by Monday he didn't feel like he had any problems. So it's like you're fighting, there's different levels of mental illness, and I've been saying this for a while now. I feel like some mental illnesses are they might as well be considered terminal. They're stage 4. My brother was stage 4. I don't know that there was anything we could do to save him. I went through the motions for a long time, and it was exhausting, and it drove my own illness. I'm glad I advocated as I did, but I don't think the outcome would have been any different. That's one camp of people. And then there's a camp of people like us who aren't as resistant to treatment, who can advocate for themselves on some level, who are willing to show up and be present and be authentic and be able to say,
I have a problem.
I have a problem. I have bipolar illness and I struggle, and I'm terrified that you're going to judge me, but I'm willing to take that risk because it's important.
I'd rather live and acknowledge that this is my problem. Because if I didn't acknowledge it and didn't seek out the help when I need it, it'd be a whole different conversation.
Hiding is exhausting.
Yeah.
It is. I think that's one of the points that we made also in our lost recording was how exhausting it actually is just balancing, just being. Mm-hmm. Even when you're well, even like right now, I was saying earlier, I'm in a pretty good place. Oh, gross. I just wiped my eyeliner off all over my hand. I'm in a pretty good place with my symptoms, and my obsessive compulsive disorder is pretty controlled. Although I say that now and I'm looking at my bloody fucking fingers because I chew the skin from around my fingernails. But my bigger compulsions, and I'm saying this because I think it's important, because it's embarrassing, but I hold my poop. That is my biggest compulsion. It's a sense of control. To have it, that's my trigger. Or that's my indicator to know that something has triggered a flare up in these symptoms, and I need to step back, and I'm well enough now that I can do that. But there are times when I can't fucking do that.
Right.
I just can't. I'm incapable of the self-awareness that it takes to go, okay, hold my poop again. What's going on in my life that is making me do this? Like what? And sometimes it's just little things. Like it can be, for me, financial issues are a huge trigger for me, because obsessive compulsive disorder is an anxiety disorder, and it causes any kind of financial strife. I have to be careful. I have to watch. And like I was saying, my husband doesn't recognize any of that. Well, of course, he has no idea that I'm holding a poop. Like, how's he gonna know?
You walk by and tell him, I'm holding my poop.
Hi. Holding one for you. No, because then that makes me physically sick. Because actually holding your poop makes you not able to poop.
Yeah.
And it starts this whole just chain of badness. But we didn't talk about this in the last recording, and I want to. I did that when I was a child. I had no fucking idea that that's what I was doing. But at family functions or situations where I was feeling anxiety, I held and poop. I also self-harmed. I used to shove needles into my fucking molars, into my teeth at night. When my parents argued, I would bite straight pins until they stuck in my teeth. And I fucking picked holes in my scalp under my hair, and no one saw. And all of these are symptoms that I hid. I had a fucking tic in high school that now, knowing what I have now, is very common for adolescents, particularly teenagers, to have tics when they suffer from obsessive compulsive disorder. So I've had this forever.
I think that's one thing we talked about earlier is, you get your diagnosis, and whether or not it rocks you at the time, is irrelevant, but you start to learn more about the pathology, and you look back and you go, oh, yeah, that explains this, or that explains this, and it all fits into this symptomology. And you also start to develop this insight into your family relationships. And like we were talking about, it's like generations of illness goes untalked about. That black sheep, that crazy uncle that drank too much, perhaps he was drinking too much because he was self-medicating because of this or that, or the mom that's just been very difficult to deal with all of her life. Maybe she was an undiagnosed bipolar type 1 or type 2. It's just we've never been given the vocabulary and the license to talk about this honestly.
No, and I will be honest, because I've known Kaylee for 20-something years. Yeah. You were in my grandparents' old house in Bay City. Maybe. So I can say with complete confidence now, knowing my symptoms, that my grandmother probably has obsessive compulsive disorder. And she's a fucking hoarder. And my mom, I know, has obsessive compulsive disorder, because the behaviors in her that infuriate me, if I step back, they infuriate me because they're behaviors that I now have control of, because I understand them. And that when I'm losing control, those are the things that filter back up.
Yeah.
And so I know that this has just gone on. And my mom is convinced that that's just the way she is. That's just who she is. She's never had a diagnosis. She doesn't go to counseling. She doesn't get medication. That's just who I am. It's how I'm made.
That makes me think about the first time that I was ever prescribed the right class of drugs, which is was profound. Like, I'd been on medication off and on throughout my 20s, and then in my early 30s I was prescribed Lamictal, which is a mood stabilizer, and I thought, oh, here we go again, like another round of feeling like a guinea pig.
Take that, don't you? I've heard that.
And I tell you, I started Lamictal, and 6 weeks later it was like the clouds parted, and I thought, holy shit, is this what it's like? Is this what it's like to just remove 10% of us, the struggle, daily struggle out? It was just like, it was being able to take a little of the white noise away and be able to sense that what I considered normal was just so exhausting. And
it is a weird, it is hard to describe that feeling. It's because I think another thing that people don't get is any kind of medication like that takes a while. It takes some time to take effect. And when it does, though, it is like the first time I took Zoloft, it took like a miserable 3 weeks, almost a month. I thought, this isn't working. This is horrible. I cried all the fucking time. And then one morning I woke up and it was like somebody had flipped a fucking switch. And I was like, I feel like I could breathe again. And that like weird itching inside of my body stopped. And I was like, whoa.
Meds are such a crapshoot. They come with their...
They are. Because sometimes they...
I mean, you have to ride the roller coaster. Like we talked about earlier, you have to decide what you're willing to put up with in order to have a benefit overall. It's like, you know, if I take my Latuda, which has been proven to help me, even though increasing the dose made me a little crazy for a couple days and felt like I was crawling on my skin. And then you increase the dose again, you feel like you're crawling on the skin. But are you willing to go through that to know that on the other side is a little bit more stability and feeling like you can participate in your life? And are you willing to be nauseous every day when you take it? You know, going off one medication has led to me taking this new medication. In addition to that, now I take a medication for the side effect of this one. So it's nothing.
We did have a big conversation about this, and
nothing is a straight line.
And weight gain with these drugs, and the sexual side effects with these drugs, and they make them all really unappealing to take. But it is a trade-off.
Yeah.
And it's, like you were saying, they are making some progress on the weight gain.
Yeah, they've realized that people don't care how good they feel if they feel like they've gained a bunch of weight. And so it doesn't matter what the efficacy rate is proven on your drug. If you're turning into a big fat beast, you're not going to take it. So I don't care if my schizophrenia symptoms are at bay, I've gotten fat, I'm not going to take them. So pharmaceutical companies are now getting wise to the fact that if they can formulate things that don't have these nasty side effects, they will move more units. It's simply, it's not about saving people's lives, it's about
making money.
Making money, and that's why, you know.
I hate them and I love them all at the same time for that. I don't want them just to be making these drugs to move units, but if they could actually come up with something that didn't have some of these nasty side effects, I would be eternally grateful.
That's the path that they're hopefully getting on now, and I'm so thankful that we have the options we have now as opposed to even 15 years ago. I mean, it's always getting better. I mean, I was seriously considering ECT.
Yep.
As early as 6 months ago, as recent as 6 months ago, because I felt like the meds weren't working, and I had a doctor finally tell me, listen, you haven't failed these medications. You haven't failed everything.
These aren't your medications. We need to change it again.
We're going to change it again. I thought, here we go. Here we go again. Really? Just you know, do ECT and have it done. Turns out it wasn't that easy.
Yeah.
I'm done.
There. I think the thing was for me is I just had to, okay, these aren't my meds. I got to try something else. These aren't mine. These weren't meant for me. There's something else that was meant for me. Yeah. That's going to help me and work way better than some of these.
And you got to be able to stay the course and go through that. And I mean,
it's a challenge, especially when you can't find providers, or you lose your healthcare coverage, or you don't have healthcare coverage,
or
just
even
gotta want it. Sadly,
this is what I hope comes of this, and I always hope that when we do these, they help at least one person that's struggling with what we're struggling with in their struggle. I just said struggle so many times in a row. Struggle. It doesn't make sense anymore. I feel like, never mind. I totally got off track.
Could be the meds.
No, that's what I was saying. I feel like,
or the lack thereof.
I feel like conversations like this, like look, we can relate to each other. Mm-hmm. We've all three been through it. We all three go through it. I'm not going to judge you. She's not going to judge you. Y'all aren't going to judge me. But if I sat across from one of my other friends and said, look, I have obsessive compulsive disorder and I hold my poop until I can't shit for days.
Well, she was going to the bathroom. I was rearranging stuff on your desk over here, so don't worry about it.
So, you know.
Which will mess you up later, but.
I think having these conversations with people who can't relate.
Yeah. That's been.
And trying to help people understand and form a little empathy.
You said something just a few minutes ago, like you said you felt like you were crawling out of your skin. I'm like, that is how I feel on some days. Like I could rip my skin off and still not feel right. Mm-hmm. And all I want to do is sit on the couch and rock. Mm-hmm. I don't want you talking to me. It's not that I'm happy. It's not that I'm sad. It's just I'm a no at this point for the universe, and it's better this way for me because my body can't take any more than what it's doing to itself right now, which is feels like my skin needs to be shit. I just need to rip it off and call it good. And I just my brother will come out of his room sometimes, and I'm on the couch, just perfectly content on the couch watching Law and Order, whatever the hell I'm watching, but I know something's not right in my little planet because I'm like shaking back and forth. It can be like that for days, but the crawling out of your skin thing is less. It's not a pleasant feeling.
And this is another thing I want people to understand is like the attitude. Like I grew up around a lot of older people. Like I had a lot of old relatives when I was a little kid. This attitude that it's all in your head.
You pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
Pull yourself up, toughen up. It's all in your head. That is extremely damaging,
right,
to our culture, to everyone. If
it was a matter of just wanting it, there would be no mental illness.
Exactly.
There would be no fat people.
No one chooses
right
this, and
not my choice.
It's infuriating, actually, when I hear people say, well, you just got to suck it up. Yeah. You just got to move on. Or even when I hear people say to themselves, look, this is just how I am. It's just the way things need to be. I just can't do this thing. Or I just can't do that thing. Your life doesn't have to be like that.
Right.
Like, you don't have to live like that.
Oh, something else we were talking about is, if you feel like shit about yourself, and if your internal tape is saying that you're a piece of shit, you're going to find things in your world to confirm that. Mm-hmm. And so not advocating for yourself is almost guaranteed if you don't feel like you're worth it. Mm-hmm. And that's what depression does, is it robs you of your ability to feel worth. And that's, I think, I was talking about Brene Brown earlier, like my spirit animal. It's like the heart of it, I think, if you just take with radical acceptance the idea that you're worthy of love and belonging, and that we all are. And we may not be able to apply that to ourselves, but you would certainly give that grace to a stranger or to a friend and go, of course they're worthy of love and belonging, even if they're an asshole. On an innate level, you were just worthy of love and belonging because you were here. And somehow you have to be able to grab that for yourself and go, okay, I'm worthy of it. I don't know how to get it. I don't know how to get that feeling, but on some level, I'm worth that fight. And get out of your own way long enough to stop that negative tape. Mm-hmm. So you're able to see help when it's coming.
The getting out of your own way thing is
You know, that whole, like, well, this is just the way I am. Well, it doesn't have to be the way you
It doesn't
are.
have to be that bad. It really, if you can find help, it doesn't have to be as bad.
No,
as
and I
it
get
can
very
be.
frustrated. I don't know how to combat that in people sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think that it is very much the pull yourself up by your bootstraps message that makes people say, well, this is just the way I am. This is what I have to live with.
No,
I don't have to talk about this. You don't need to know about this. Like,
I refuse to accept that. If you want help, we'll get you help one way or another.
you deserve
Yeah.
a full and happy life. Everybody deserves a full and happy life. You don't have to be like this. I always felt like my life was stunted in some way when I tried to work around the symptoms that I had.
Yeah.
But then that meant that I couldn't go places that were like too crowded, or I couldn't drive on the freeway in rush hour, or I couldn't do. It's so liberating to just be brave and ask for help.
Yeah.
And then have those things.
I think that the best thing that's happened since my hospitalization last year and really working on all of this is it's not about big, grand, momentous occasions. It's about being able to show up and not have to hide. And, you know, my poor coworkers have had to see me go through ups and downs of all of this. And I figured it would be impossible to kind of keep them in the dark when they clearly knew something was wrong with me. And so when I outed myself and said, you know what, I'm bipolar. I was in the hospital. I've been doing this outpatient treatment for like 6 weeks. I took a leave of absence. I lost my shit. And I think I finally have a chance at living. And while some people found a way to be cruel, it was a very small amount. Most people rose to the occasion and were impressed with my ability to just be authentic, which felt foreign and weird to me because I certainly didn't feel like I was worthy of anybody's respect over something that seems so trivial, but I think it normalized the situation. And, you know, I owe those people a huge amount of thanks because that was where I got to test out the idea that being okay with who I am in my diagnosis. That was my little environment where I got to try it out.
It's like your micro.
Yeah. And so I came out to this little world and said this, you know, and guess what? It doesn't change how competent I am or incompetent. It doesn't change what kind of friend I am. It doesn't, it's been here all along. I'm just now saying it.
I'm just got the balls now to tell you guys.
Now to say it. And it was so much less exhausting to just be alive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how my advocacy looks now. I am not throwing silent auctions together. I'm not going to do a walkathon. I'm just going to...
If I'm walking, it's because I need to feel good today, and it's good for me to get out.
Yeah. You know, I'm just going to try on days that I can to own where I'm at.
Mm.
Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad, you know?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I think my last therapist helped me kind of get to that place where I'm just, this day is today. It's what it is. Today I'm okay.
Feels like any other day for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, well, I think we're going to wrap this up because you got to get out of here.
You got a trip to go on.
Yeah, my reward for being brave and getting out of the house and having my voice recorded is time by myself. Just me. Oh my God, it's going to be so exciting. I can't even stand it.
See? Anyway, guys, we encourage you to reach out.
Ask the hard questions.
Ask the hard questions if you're an advocate for someone and advocate for yourself. Really. And this is normal shit. This is life. This is our life. This is everyday life.
Yep.
There's no stigma. I'm not ashamed, and you shouldn't be either. Awesome. Well, thanks, and be nice to yourselves, people.